Hello, I'm John Thorne from Thorny Motorsport, and this video is announcing our springs. Now, we've been instrumental in helping people in terms of identifying problems with springs and McLarens. Sadly, it is a relatively common failure on all models. It doesn't seem to be mileage related, doesn't seem to be use related, it doesn't seem to be luck of the draw. Now, the downside with McLaren is that even though the spring is broken, they don't make the spring available separately. It must be purchased along with the shock absorber. Now, depending on the model, the shock absorber can be anything between £1,400 to near £2,300. Quite a big cost when anything that's broken is the spring. So, we've worked with a spring manufacturer in the UK and also with a spring institute to actually identify the causes of the problem and why, so we're not replicating it, to come up with an aftermarket option to solve that problem of broken springs so you can keep using your damper. Now, first things first, if the damper has failed, good luck. We still haven't managed to find an alternative supply for dampers, but we're working on it. But it does mean if you just got a broken spring, and it's common, and the damper is fine with no issues, then you can just replace the spring without replacing the whole damper. Now, these are £100 each, compared to obviously £1,500 for a spring, and we're selling them in pairs, in axles, because generally speaking, when you do replace a damper or a spring, in real life you should really replace the pair along the axle because they've had the same level of wear on them. However, at £1,500 a go, we have sort of dropped that little plan because it's simply very expensive. You think about it, a broken rear and a broken front spring, you're a £12,000 bill on some cars. That seems a lot for a broken spring. So we're making them available in pairs. So we do recommend you replace them in pairs. So it means you can actually, if you take the shock off, remove the spring, put the spring on, back on. Now, we've already done a video about how to remove springs and put springs on cars on a 570. It's pretty similar to the car, so please do check that out as well if you need to do it yourself. All the models are covered. There are a couple that aren't, to be honest, because it all depends on volume of cars. For example, the 12C with lift is a different spring to a 12C without lift. There's not many 12Cs with lift, so we've concentrated on getting the 12C without lift as the first ones available. But we will develop one for every single model as and when they come to pass and require. Now, what you're wondering, why are they breaking? Okay, now there's actually a thing called a Spring Institute, not joking, it actually exists. And there, it's an independent scientific body whose job is to investigate springs, believe it or not. And they investigate it for manufacturers to find the problems and develop new products. Now, what we found with the Mclaren spring is that whilst it's nicely painted, it doesn't have the right coating underneath the paint. So as you can see on the spring here, and I'll show it there, when the spring is compressed in its flat blade, here you can see in our spring there's a gap between them. Okay. On the standard one, it's compressed shut, so you can't actually see a gap. You can just see it on this one here, there's a tiny, tiny gap. So when you make the spring and you have that compressed shut and you put it in for electrostatic coating and then painting, you can't quite get the paint in between those two bits of the spring because it's touchy. What happens is over time, corrosion comes through and it eats into that joint, and what you tend to get is a break right at that point on the spring itself. Now, the springs can break in every area, but 90% of the time it's in that top coil. And if it breaks in this top coil here, technically you won't even notice because that spring's already compressed, it's not actually working. But you have that crack and that break, the problem you have in most countries is that A, it can spread, and B, in the UK it's an MOT fail, any spring break. And you have to break in different places. So you can see on our spring we have a small gap, it's still touching to some extent, but what we have changed is we have changed the coating so it is far more advanced in terms of resisting corrosion in the UK. 1,000 hours of salt brine solution will sit in these things and they won't corrode. So unless you're going to park your car under the sea for 1,000 hours, you're probably going to be okay if you have a repeat. However, we are still covered by our warranty and all cars we go through. This is now available anybody. Their stock is coming in as they come through for any model. This will also be made available eventually exclusively through our dealers worldwide. But for the moment you can buy it worldwide and we'll ship it anywhere you want to be. It's very straightforward to fit. There's a video how to do it as well. Now, we are doing other things, looking at accumulation and various things as well, which we're quite a long way down bushes and various bits, which are getting slower and slower, but we thought we'd start with the spring because it's by far the most common failure, and it also means, as far as you're concerned, you don't need to buy another shock. Okay? So that's available now. There'll be a link in a shop somewhere, I imagine. Please do help yourself in there. If your model isn't covered yet, let us know, and we will put it in the system we develop for you. Okay? Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Cheers.